Welcome everyone to the next Alumni Career Webinar, Make LinkedIn Work for You, featuring Allison Shields and Dennis Kennedy, and sponsored by the Holy Cross Lawyers Association. I'm Maura Sweeney, Director of Alumni Career Development at Holy Cross, and I'm happy to welcome you to today's webinar, offered exclusively for the Holy Cross community. We'll be together for an hour today. After the formal presentation, Allison and Dennis will take questions from you for as long as time allows. I encourage you to submit questions throughout this presentation by checking out the Q&A function located on the control panel. We also encourage you to submit thoughts using the chat, and please direct those thoughts to all attendees. The presentation is recorded and will be made available to all participants in a few days. Now it's my pleasure to introduce you to the chair of the HCLA, John Loughnane, from the class of 1987. John will do the honor of introducing today's speakers. Thank you, John.
Thank you very much, Mara, and thank you for everybody for joining us today. Just wanted to give a quick note about the Holy Cross Lawyers Association before introducing our presenters. If you're not familiar with the HCLA, please check out our website. You can just Google Holy Cross Lawyers Association to find it. You can also access it under the Alumni Resources tab on the college's main site. There's three things on the site in particular I wanted to point out. First, you will find a link there to the Career Advisor directory and also the Alumni online community. So both of those are good resources for folks. Secondly, you will see some information there about the Holy Cross Lawyers Association Awards Program, which currently consists of the Lifetime Achievement Award and also the Distinguished Service Award. The nomination process for both of those is open currently. It closes on June 30th. Please check that out and help us spread the word. Third, I wanted you to check the website to see how to join the Holy Cross Lawyers Association LinkedIn group, which of course brings us to the topic of today. I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to introduce our two presenters, Allison Shields and Dennis Kennedy. I met Allison and Dennis a few years ago through the board of the American Bar Association Legal Technology Resource Center, LTRC. If you're not familiar with the work of LTRC, I encourage you to check that out as well. You can just Google American Bar Association Legal Technology Resource Center. Just as the name implies, the LTRC provides legal technology resources for legal professionals. You can also check out the blog, lawtechnologytoday.com. Allison and Dennis recently co-authored Making LinkedIn Work for You, a practical handbook for lawyers and other legal professions. It's available at Amazon and I think fine bookstores everywhere. I've read it and I highly recommend the work. The years that Allison and Dennis spent in the legal trenches as practicing lawyers is apparent in their practical approach to the successful use of technology. I thought the HCLA would enjoy hearing from them, and I was delighted when they agreed without hesitation to present to us today. Just a bit more background on each of them. Dennis is currently the Executive Director of the Kennedy Idea Propulsion Laboratory. He is a consulting innovator, tech attorney, and adjunct professor at both the University of Michigan and the Michigan State University College of Law. He wrote the legal technology column for the ABA Journal for many years, and he has written several books on legal technology and innovation. Dennis co-hosts the widely respected Kennedy Mile Report podcast on the Legal Talk Network. You can learn more about Dennis at denniskennedy.com. Allison is currently the president of Legal Ease Consulting, Inc. She provides marketing, social media, business development, productivity, and practice management, coaching and consulting services for lawyers and law firms. She writes and lectures on these topics for a variety of organizations, including bar associations and law schools. Allison has written a number of books and, of course, co-authored the work of today's concern with Dennis, Make LinkedIn Work for You, a practical handbook for lawyers and other legal professionals. You can learn more about Allison at her site, legaleaseconsulting.com. At this point, I will go on mute and turn off the video so you can hear directly from Allison and Dennis. Enjoy, and thank you again.
Well, we want to welcome everybody, and I think I'm going to start things off, but I am going to ask Mara to put up our first poll of the day, and it's designed to just kind of help us assess what the audience is, and I think in a lot of ways to inform you sort of where you fit in to the LinkedIn user base. among the audience. So if you'll go ahead and do that, then we'll refer to that. But I wanted to start out by saying that probably there's been never, ever in my career has professional networking been more important than it is today. With all that's going on, with layoffs, furloughs, all kinds of changes happening, it's really important to keep in touch with people and to build, grow and nurture your professional network. And that's where LinkedIn comes in. So LinkedIn has always been thought of as a professional network. It's a business network, so a business network for business people. Founded, or actually became public in May 2003. I joined shortly after that, so I've been on LinkedIn close to 17 years. 600 million users, and over 80% of lawyers say that they maintain a LinkedIn presence, or at least a LinkedIn account. Most of the lawyers we talk to tell us that they just don't feel that they're using LinkedIn effectively, and that's part of the reason for the book and for this webinar. So on the next slide, a couple of important facts that I've noticed. And so I spent time at MasterCard in-house, and what I did there is I can kind of second some of the things here. So I would say that LinkedIn is the primary source that in-house counsel use to gather information about outside counsel, and even the 53% number there feels a little bit low to me based on my experience. So the question becomes, why should lawyers and why should you use LinkedIn? And sometimes people get a little bit confused about LinkedIn, and you treat it as a way to advertise to people, to reach out to people. That's really more you might do emails, you might do advertising. LinkedIn is really different, and I think that the best approach is to think of it as a way that you do word of mouth referrals. I mean, it's also, as we'll talk, it's also obviously about getting information out about you, but the best use, I think, is to think in terms of word of mouth referrals. And so how do you connect to the people who refer to you? So it's a big network, it's customizable, it gets updated all the time, and it allows you to build relationships online that in times now where you can't do it in person. So it's taking the place of that, and it allows you to do online what corresponds to what you have been doing in real life. And I think to successfully use LinkedIn, you're kind of mapping what you do in real life onto LinkedIn. And so there's some analogies and different approaches that you take, and that will help you set your strategy. So a couple things we like to have you keep in mind. So one is that your LinkedIn profile is about you, but it isn't for you. So sometimes people just feel like, oh, I'm putting my resume up there, or just what I have on my bio on my law firm website. Really, your audience is a little bit different. So you want to kind of think in terms of what information they want to get about you, even more so than the standard stuff that you would do. So just not map resume on there. We'll talk about that. And then you just have to be really mindful of your audience and what their needs are. So it's also, and I think this is where it's really underutilized, and we'll talk about it is a content platform. So you can share updates, you can write articles, demonstrate your expertise, and in a lot of ways become a thought leader, and also connect to other thought leaders and to the thought leaders in your field. So it's important, as in all things, to have goals. So when we think about purpose, and this is a big part of our book, we like to try to answer the question, what are you hiring LinkedIn to do for you? And I think the better and more clearly you can answer this, the more value you will get out of LinkedIn. So a lot of people will say, I wanted to get on LinkedIn so I could get new clients, and I didn't get any new clients, so it's not helpful to me. I'm like, you kind of are using the wrong tool for that. But if you say, what I want to use LinkedIn for is to connect to my network of referrers and potential referrers. Then I think you start to see the value of LinkedIn. And I also think the more precise you are, the better LinkedIn will work for you. So you might say, I want to use LinkedIn to get a job. Well, you can find job postings all over the place. But I think if you look at LinkedIn as what you're actually hiring it to do is to help you get interviews, then I think your use of LinkedIn becomes more sophisticated and more valuable to you. So we talk and we'll get started here on the 3 building blocks. This is sort of our core insight about LinkedIn in the book. Is there are 3 key building blocks of LinkedIn: profiles, connections, and participation. And I will turn it over to Allison to talk about profiles.
Thanks, Dennis. So as Dennis mentioned, we talk about 3 building blocks of LinkedIn, and the first one is your profile. Your profile is really the foundation of everything that you do on LinkedIn. I like to think of it as something that stands in the place of me as my networking. You know, Dennis mentioned corresponding what you do on LinkedIn to what you do in real life. My profile is standing in as me when I'm networking online. And so I want to make sure that my profile, it represents me the best way it possibly can. So Maura, I think we have another poll here, if you want to launch the next poll. And this poll is really, how well do you think your LinkedIn profile represents you? Is your profile really accurate and up to date and showcases your experience? I would guess that there's probably going to be a low number of you that respond that way, just based on our first poll, because we had over 50% of you who said that you were really at the beginner level on LinkedIn, which is great because it means that this webinar is perfect for you. And then we had another 43% who said you were intermediate, and I'm hoping that those of you who put yourself in that category would get some tips from today. And so maybe you fall into one of the next 2 categories, which is my profile represents me well. Most of the major things are there, but I know it could be updated a little bit. And then maybe there are more of you who fall into the last 2 categories. Not so well, there are major gaps. Maybe we can help you fill those gaps today. Or not very well at all, which I see you won't be alone if you answer that way. There are a lot of lawyers whose profile is very sparse at best and they don't have much there. And again, hopefully we'll be able to correct that for you today. But you know, the way I look at your profile and the way Dennis and I talk about it, your profile needs to help you stand out from the crowd. So I'm looking at the poll results and I see we had 67% of you say that you were in the second category, that most of the major items were there, but you could update it a little bit. And then we had another 20% in the not so well, there are some major gaps. So hopefully let's talk about some ways that you can fill those in today. And get your LinkedIn profile to help you stand out from the crowd. It's a way for you to differentiate yourself from other people who do what you do, not just other lawyers, but also other lawyers who are in your practice area. So let's talk about one of the ways to do that. And we like to talk a lot about professional headline, but I'm going to take a step back from that because I know that we did have a question. One of the questions that we got on the registration was about your headshot. Somebody wanted to know, hey, do I really need a professional headshot? I'm a little concerned that my profile picture is not as professional as it could be. So don't fall into the camp that you have to have a professional headshot, but your headshot on LinkedIn should be professional looking, at least. We all have these great cameras that we walk around with us in our pockets now, right? Our smartphones are great cameras, our tablets have great cameras. Everybody's got a great digital camera. So you can take a picture on your digital camera. I wouldn't do a selfie just because they tend to look awkward, but you can have somebody else take a picture for you. Just want to make sure that it looks professional. You want to have kind of a plain background and get a close-up image so that you really see your face, because on LinkedIn, that little picture follows you around and it's often very tiny. And so if there's a lot of background, or if you're really taking a shot that's like waist up, it's going to be very hard to recognize you. So that's what I'll say about your photo. And in general, in terms of presenting yourself on LinkedIn, one of the biggest mistakes that we find that lawyers make is with their professional headline. And that's what's circled in this picture here. And you can see you have a lot of room in your professional headline to really showcase what you do. So we look at the headline on LinkedIn as kind of a mini elevator pitch. You have 120 characters, which is really more than you probably think that you have. You really want to be descriptive with it. So too many lawyers just say partner or associate or attorney. It doesn't really give me a lot of information. And that headline, just like your photo, follows you around on LinkedIn. And one of the ways that you want to get people to be more curious about you and to interact with you on LinkedIn is to have a headline that draws them in and makes them want to click over and read your full profile or to start engaging with you on LinkedIn. So some things to think about when you're building your headline. Think about who your clients are. You know, what kind of people do you represent? What do you do for those clients? What benefits do your clients derive from working with you? And so this is just a little bit of an example. Here's two lawyers that do the same thing. And this came from a a LinkedIn search that I did for an immigration lawyer. And both of these people came up, but if you look at the difference in the headlines, you can see if I'm doing a search and I'm looking for an immigration attorney, chances are good I'm going to click on the second result here because she has immigration attorney in her headline. So it's really much more descriptive, and I have to do a lot less work to figure out if this is a person that might be able to either answer my question or whatever it is that I'm looking for on LinkedIn. The next section that we find a lot of lawyers have very little information on in their profile is their About section, which falls right underneath kind of your contact info at the top of your LinkedIn profile. It used to be called your summary, now it's called About, but I still think of it as a summary. Or I look at it as almost like the cover letter to the rest of your LinkedIn profile, which is sort of laid out, if you think about it, like a resume with your experience and your education and all of those things. So the About section is a great opportunity for you to include some detail and to tie all of your experience together to show potential clients or really referral sources what kind of people you help and what you do and how all of your experience comes together to help clients now. And the same thing goes for your experience section, which is the section that lists all of your positions. Again, it's almost like a resume. So we recommend that you use some keywords, use the words that other people would use to describe what you do, not necessarily the words that lawyers use. Unless your referral sources or your potential clients are lawyers and they know those legal terms, you want to use the terms that they use because that's what they're going to be searching on. You want to write for your audience. Again, Dennis talked in the beginning about knowing who your audience is and what you're trying to accomplish on LinkedIn. That's very important. Again, this idea of legalese, if your audience doesn't know it, it's not worth putting into your LinkedIn profile. Think about telling stories about what you do. You know, you're not writing a legal brief, you're not writing for the court. You know, this is all about who your audience is and what you want to do. And follow the who, what, when, where, how, and why kind of framework here. There's also an opportunity to add media, which would be presentations. It could be images. It could be video to your About and Experience sections on your LinkedIn profile. If you're a new graduate, you can also add those things under education. So for most lawyers who have been out of school for a while, I wouldn't bother going back to add those things under education. Unless you've written, you know, maybe you've written a law review article or something like that, you might want to put that under education because it demonstrates what you did in school. But if you're a new grad, those are great things to help you stand out with an employer. And then finally, there's a dashboard on LinkedIn, and you want to check that out. And LinkedIn will tell you how you're doing. So, you know, we asked you what you guys thought about how well your LinkedIn profile was filled out. LinkedIn will tell you how well it thinks that you're doing. And if you're not at All-Star, which is kind of their highest rating, then it will give you prompts to help you improve your profile, to tell you how you can get to that sort of completeness factor. Dennis, do you want to move us on to our second building block?
Yeah, but first I'll go back to Mara and say we have another poll question. It's super easy for you. So the next building block is connections. And this is where people, or lawyers especially, start to drop off because they don't know what to do about connections or who's appropriate for connection or whether they should accept connections. And this is really kind of the key element of LinkedIn from the beginning. So if you're familiar with the 6 degrees of separation or the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, as some people like to call it, that's the notion that LinkedIn was built on. So you have first degree connections, you have second degree connections, and then you have third degree or beyond connections. So your first degrees are the people that you're directly connected to on LinkedIn. So you've either invited them and they've accepted it, or you've accepted their invitation. So it's a mutual decision that you're connected. The second degrees are the people who are connected to your first degree connections. And so it's a simple way to look at it. In networking terms, and sort of in systems thinking terms, that the first degree connections are known as strong connections. The second degree connections are known as weak connections, and there's value to each. And if you start to think about how things work in the real world, you may find that you get referrals in other business from people who you don't consider direct connections. So there is a lot of value in those second degree connections. And then a lot of what you're doing is trying to promote your second degrees to first degrees, if that's your approach. So 40% of you have more than 500 LinkedIn connections. That's sort of the point, basically, where people who are serious LinkedIn users start to take you seriously. So if it says below 500 LinkedIn connections, it sort of seems like you're not really using it. So it's kind of a good tip-off of where you need to be, if that makes sense to you. And so we'll talk about that. So you make connections based on your goals. Typically, people think in terms of quantity or quality. Both philosophies are good. I think these days, in these times, quantity is a little bit better than quality. And you just need to think about, how many people look at how many people are in your Outlook contacts, how many people you interact with, and 500 is a little bit arbitrary, don't get me wrong, but I think you can go a little bit too far on quality and kind of keeping the number down to people you only know exactly, you've met, you've had certain types of interactions. It kind of eliminates the chance for this serendipitous connection, or people might reach out to you. But you're going to have to make a choice about that. Alice and I always talk about how this decision about what connection invitations you accept and the numbers you do, I think is very different for men than it is for women. So there's going to be a bunch of different factors that you will look at. People often ask me, should I accept friend requests from people I don't know, even if I have a number of mutual connections? I tend to do that, but I tend to be more public. We've written a book. I do a lot of speaking and other things, so I tend to accept more invitations. Just something you need to think through. But typically where people look is quantity versus quality. No right answer, no wrong answer. I tend to lean these days to adding more people. And part of the reason is with people losing their jobs and moving around, that one of the great things about LinkedIn is that you can stay in touch with people through LinkedIn, even though they might be in a different job. So you have them in LinkedIn through that connection, and then they kind of self-update. And you may learn they got a new job, you can congratulate them, and so that opens up some good possibilities. So how do you find people? You can search for people that you know by name. Is the easiest way to do it. There's all kinds of search filters, from keywords to connections, to locations, to industries, to schools. all sorts of things like that, and that can help you identify people that you might want to connect with. To me, anytime I get a business card from people, I send them a LinkedIn invitation. If I'm attending a webinar, I'm speaking on a webinar, I invite other people who are speaking there, that sort of thing. So you can have some strategies. And you can also search by companies. So LinkedIn has really thought this through in 7 years. So a lot of our connection it's come from two important places. And one is especially important today, but one is the people we used to work with. And so those are the people we tend to fall out of touch with. And those are the people who are actually likely to refer things to us if they know what it is that we do. So the company search can help you do that. And then the alumni search. And there are two things that I really like about the alumni search. So one is it's super easy to find all the people who are in your graduating class. And that's great. But LinkedIn also makes it easy to locate the people who were on campus the same time that you were. And that really opens some things up. And it may also, and then as you go to other classes, you could say, I may find some people who have similar background, similar interests. You can do those sorts of things. So you can actually add a lot of connections through the alumni and the people that you used to work with. And it can get pretty granular if you use the premium accounts, and we'll talk about that a little bit at the end. I think that you can even get more granular than that and really identify who it is that you're looking for. I guess that we found, so this is the way we'd find Maura through this. And then it's this simple matter of clicking the connect button. If you personalize the message and you say, hey, I also went to Holy Cross, would love to connect, then odds are you're going to get anybody who's alumni who isn't, on the rampage against the school for some perceived mistreatment while they were there, is going to connect with you. So we usually say personalize those invitations. Simply don't use the default invitation. Sometimes you can't avoid that, especially if you send a connection request from the app. The mobile app, it's easy to get see that invitation goes out before you can personalize it. And then give them a reason to connect. So you would say, as I always say when I do a presentation, if you say to Allison and me, send us an invitation, you say, saw your webinar today and you were totally awesome, odds are pretty good we'll connect to you. So that's one way to think about it. And then Allison is really great at this to continue the conversation. So once you connect with somebody, thank them for connecting. And then we can't do this as much as we used to, but if they're local, you could invite them to coffee, that sort of thing. But you can kind of start down the path of leveling up your connections. So lots of good things there. I do want to mention one thing that's not on the slide, which is LinkedIn does this thing that's called people you may know. And so 17 years of looking at networks, they've come up with algorithms that suggest people who you might know. It's really useful to look at that because it may surface people who will surprise you. And that's good. The other thing that I use with connections is to look at the number of mutual connections, because if you have a lot of connections in common, even if you don't know that person, it's likely that they will connect with you. So the next building block, number 3, is participation. And Allison will take that with another poll for you.
Thanks, Dennis. We can go with our poll here. Okay, so here's our poll for building block number 3, which is participation. And it's, do you read or visit your LinkedIn newsfeed or homepage, because that's where your newsfeed appears on LinkedIn, at least twice a week? So another easy yes or no poll for you. just to gauge how much you guys are really participating. So, Dennis mentioned in our last building block that a lot of lawyers fall off in connections because they're not really sure what to do. I personally, in my experience talking to lawyers, see more falling off in participation than in connections. They tend to know how to send and accept invitations. Whether they do it strategically or not is another issue. But I don't see as much in the way of participation. They tend to be more lurkers. So this is an interesting response. I see we have 64% that say they actually do visit their news feed at least twice a week, and 36% say no. So I think that's an interesting stat, and maybe we should have asked a question instead of do they visit, do they post? Because I think that might have been a different response. But let's talk about some of the different ways that you can participate on LinkedIn. And again, we keep going back on every one of these building blocks to what are your goals, because your goals are going to tell you how to participate the most effectively. So depending on what it is that you want to accomplish with LinkedIn, as Dennis said, are you looking to get interviews, or are you a new grad looking to get interviews through LinkedIn? Are you looking to build up your expertise? Are you looking to connect with a certain group of people? Are you looking to get in front of a particular audience? Those things are going to tell you how best to participate on LinkedIn. So the first thing we kind of just mentioned was the news feed. The first way that you can participate on LinkedIn is by actually posting yourself, and it's easy enough to do. You see it right on the top of your homepage. There's a little box that says, start a post, and you can click in there, and as you can see, the post doesn't just have to be text. You can add images, you can add video, you can add documents to your posts on LinkedIn as well. And then what happens when you click in that box is you get a little pop-up, and you can do a whole bunch of different things. We'll talk about hashtags in a little bit. But one of the things I want to just call out on this slide is at the very top where you see under my picture, it says anyone in that box. And that's the box that you can choose the audience for your post. So you want to take a look at that, who is seeing that. If you're on Twitter, you can change that audience to anyone and Twitter. So oftentimes somebody asked me the other day, do I use Twitter? And the answer is I do, but I rarely ever go to Twitter. Usually my posts to Twitter come from LinkedIn because I choose anyone and Twitter when I'm on LinkedIn. So my LinkedIn posts also get tweeted. So that's kind of how I handle that. So what happens then to a post once you post it? Well, people will see your posts in their newsfeed on their LinkedIn homepage. And they can also see them, they can also see them, I may have taken out that slide. I had a slide showing you can also see what they post on LinkedIn by going to their profile. So if I went to Dennis's profile and I scroll down, I'll see under activity some of his posts, and then there's also a link to click that says see all, and then I can see all of Dennis's activity, what he likes, what he's posted, and so forth. But one of the questions that we get asked a lot on LinkedIn is how often should I post? Am I going to be annoying my audience if I post, multiple times a day or multiple times a week? My personal answer to that is no, you're never going to probably bother your audience because they don't get pinged every time that you post something, even if you're connected to them on LinkedIn. They'll see it if they happen to be on LinkedIn, they go to your news feed, or if it's a popular post and it gets a lot of engagement, then it may show up in people's news feeds longer because it's a more popular post. But most of the time, people are not going to see most of what you're posting. So you're not going to be annoying people by posting multiple times a day or multiple times a week. And then, of course, that brings us to the next question, which is, well, what is it I should be posting? I have no idea what to post on LinkedIn. And one of the misconceptions that we see a lot is lawyers thinking that they have to be content creators in order to be effective and to post on LinkedIn. And that's not necessarily true. I mean, if you are a content creator, those are fabulous things to post on LinkedIn. And what I mean by that is if you write articles, if you have a blog, if you do webinars or CLE presentations, any of those things can be subjects for posts on LinkedIn. But even if you don't do any of that, you can be a content curator. You can be an information hub for your audience and post links or articles or, images or what have you that are going to be of interest to your audience, that were created by other people. You don't always have to reinvent the wheel. So, some of the things that we recommend that lawyers do with respect to posting: post information and links that are interesting to your audience. Post articles, whether they're written by you or other people. Demonstrate your knowledge. You can just comment on something. Become a trusted information source. And, going back to that question of how can I be effective and how can I best present myself on LinkedIn, you don't want to be promotional. As Dennis mentioned early on in the webinar, there are places for that. There are advertisements that you can do, whether on LinkedIn or otherwise. But if you're posting to your news feed, you want to keep it 80% informational and only 20% promotional. But even the promotional things should be things that provide some kind of interest or value to your audience. So you can boost engagement on your posts in a number of different ways. One of the ways is to encourage engagement with other people by promoting a discussion, asking a question, putting some kind of a call to action at the end of your post to kind of spur people to do things. You can also engage with a wider audience by adding hashtags to your posts. And this is, maybe it's not relatively new anymore, but I still think of it as a relatively new addition to LinkedIn as opposed to some of your other social media outlets. But people are now following certain hashtags on LinkedIn. So if you post with a hashtag, you're going to get a wider audience than you would ordinarily with the same post without a hashtag. And LinkedIn is now actively promoting that by suggesting hashtags at the bottom of your posts when you're posting. So that's another good way to get other people to engage with your posts. You can also mention or tag other people in your posts. This is one of Dennis's posts. This is a great example. He's really good at tagging not only the people who he might be talking about in the post, so you can see that in this post where he's talking about Judge McCormick and Professor Reyes at Michigan State, but also at the end of the post, he's tagging a bunch of different people saying, essentially, hey, you might be interested in this post. And when you tag somebody in the post, as long as you don't abuse it, most of the time people are going to say, hey, why did Dennis want me to see that post? I'm not only going to go and look at it, but I'm probably going to do some kind of comment or share or something along those lines with that particular post. So again, you want to make sure that whatever you're posting provides value. Think about why your audience should care about it before you're posting it. And then again, you've got these opportunities to like, comment on, or share posts that other people are creating on LinkedIn. To me, this is by far the easiest way to participate on LinkedIn. You really don't have to do much but look at your news feed and then, hey, this is an article that my audience would be interested in. I'm going to share that. And maybe I'm going to tag a couple of people. Or I'm going to like it, or I'm going to comment, or I'm going to do all three. And you can find those options at the bottom of posts in your LinkedIn newsfeed. Another thing that you can do on LinkedIn that I think a lot of lawyers really aren't taking advantage of, and this is especially good if you don't have your own online platform anywhere else, is publishing articles on LinkedIn. And these don't necessarily have to be really long articles. They can be just a couple of paragraphs. And the way that you do that is click on Write an Article at the bottom of that post box on your home page. And then it opens up LinkedIn's publishing platform, which looks just like a word processor. It's very easy to use. And you can either write your article in another platform like Word and copy and paste it in, or write it directly into LinkedIn. And Dennis and I have done a couple of experiments with the publisher platform, and we've seen articles that we publish on LinkedIn sometimes get much better readership and engagement than the same post on our own blogs that have been around for years. And then they appear, especially if you add an image to an article that you're posting on LinkedIn, they appear, if you can see on the left here, under my articles and activity. This is a snapshot taken from my profile at one point in time. You can see the articles appear more prominently than your regular activity or your other posts. Especially if it has an image, it's another way to draw people to your profile and to what you've written and show your expertise on LinkedIn. So Dennis, let's talk about another one of our big participation recommendations, which is groups.
Yeah, so groups have long been the main way that you would think of participating in LinkedIn. So you're fortunate that you have a group at Holy Cross. Actually, I think you may have a number of them that you could join to experiment with. And one of the questions we had ahead of time was, is it acceptable to reach out to Holy Cross alumni discovered through LinkedIn to make a cold call in a way? And I would say, not only is it acceptable, it's unacceptable for you not to do that. I mean, that's definitely the way you should use it. So groups work in a couple of different ways, and there are, I think, literally zillions of groups on LinkedIn these days. So there's two things you can do. You can start your own group. Generally is not the way to go. It's kind of a recipe for disaster and disappointment unless you're really good at it. But the other way to do it is just get involved in some groups that interest you. And then you can see the discussions, you get known to that group of people. You might establish yourself as an expert or somebody who's just helpful. You build relationships. It's easy. Like if you're in a group with somebody, then you can, you can connect with them directly, so you don't have to use up one of your sort of outreach connection invitations that you're limited on. And then you just become a participant in the social group, which in the era of COVID-19 is becoming even more important. So they're an attractive way to go. So it's a good way to say, what I would say is you want to look at existing groups and kind of experiment with them. So, as I said, fortunately, you have something called the Holy Cross Lawyers Association, 996 members. I think we would expect at least 1,038 by the end of this presentation. And you'll kind of see what's going on. So we're going to do the survey here, and this will help Maura in reaching out to you, and you reaching out to Maura as well. But just kind of want to find how many people are aware of it and already have joined it. So Allison is showing a slide of what you would expect to see in a group. And so you're going to have a variety of information. You're going to see posts, you're going to see other things, and you're going to see who's involved in those groups. They can be private, they can be managed. There's a number of approaches there. And it's just a great way to participate. So you can start a discussion, you can like, you can comment, you can search the list for potential connections, really valuable. Really valuable. Share links to an article of yours, promote an upcoming event. People love photos, so you can post that. You know, if you were, you attended somebody's presentation and you took a photo of them speaking or of the audience, that's a great post for a group. And that's participation. That's generally where people are most lacking when it comes to LinkedIn. And there's just a couple of things that we think you can do that will get you more involved in LinkedIn and give you some actual return. So Allison, let's wrap up with our sort of action steps for people, and then we'll do as much Q&A as the audience can stand.
Okay, thanks, Dennis. So let's start with our first building block, which is your profile. And we've got a bunch of action steps here that we think are kind of easy to get into if you're a beginner. So start, as we talked about, with updating your headline. And I would even say your profile picture if you feel like it's not really professional. Create a well-crafted summary or about section. We didn't get a chance because we didn't have enough time today to talk about skills, but I would make sure that you add relevant skills. Skills is one of the things that's going to get your profile up to that all-star level. And you may, because again, we're talking to lawyers, there may be some ethical considerations depending on the jurisdiction where you practice. You may have some disclaimers that you need to add. If you've done all of those things, you might want to start adding more activities, different honors and awards, other things that you have done that aren't necessarily strictly professional or related to your job, but they may be community things or volunteer work, those kinds of things. Start recommending or endorsing colleagues. It's a nice thing to do, and sometimes they will reciprocate if they can. And add media to your profile. Adding those media elements, a video, a presentation, images, those things really make your profile look different. When you look at two different people's profiles and one person has them and one person doesn't, it really makes it stand out. And then make sure you're maintaining. We try to remind everybody, you know, things happen that you kind of forget about that you maybe haven't added to your LinkedIn profile. So whether you got a new job, whether you got an award, whether you've written an article, any of those things, you want to make sure that your profile is updated, and maybe even want to tweak the language. At least every 6 months, take a look at it. How about connections, Dennis?
Well, there's a couple of things that you can think of. And so this goes to quantity and quality again. But you may be in a situation where you're looking for a job, you're moving to a new geography, and I may talk about that a little bit in the Q&A, where you need to add a lot of connections quickly. So one way to up your number of connections is you simply upload your Outlook contacts or other contacts, and that allows you to basically then select the ones you want to add to LinkedIn. That's a good way to get caught up really quickly. We recommend sending personalized invitations. Sometimes you don't need to do that if you're adding a whole bunch at once, but it's generally just better to do personalized invitations and then respond to invitations that you accept. If you're not going to accept something seems spammy, you know, it's the old boyfriend, the old girlfriend thing, just ignore it. You don't have to accept any invitation that you get. And then I think you just want to actively start to look for new people to connect with, to build out that network, to make sure that your LinkedIn network reflects your real world thing. So groups are a possibility. I like people you may know. It's getting more and more sophisticated, gives you a lot of recommendations. And then I think the alumni network, both school and work, is really powerful. And then, you know, sometimes you just want to do this thing where you say, I have a goal to add, you know, X number of new contacts a week or a month. And then on top of that, to figure out a way to reach out to those people, which leads you into participation.
Okay, so our action steps for our final building block of participation. You want to start looking for groups to join. And one of our recommendations is look for groups that you already belong to in real life. So we saw that 60% of you are not part of the Holy Cross Lawyers Association LinkedIn group, so that's a good place to start. Then start posting to your feed at least once a week. And again, it doesn't have to be anything earth-shattering. It doesn't have to be brand new content. It could be just sharing an article that you think that your audience would find interesting. And then look at your feed. And so a lot of you are saying you're already looking at it twice a week. Engage with other people's posts as you're looking at them. Then they'll be wanting to engage back with you, and it just creates a whole community. Next, consider maybe creating an article, a publisher post. It could just be a couple of paragraphs. It doesn't have to be, you know, 13 or 1500 words. Join in or comment on group discussions. So you've joined those groups. Now it's time to either start your own conversation or join in another conversation. Engage with posts on company pages also. So if you're engaged with a brand or another law firm, or your client's business has a company page, engage with those posts also. And then in terms of maintenance, you want to post at least once a week, review and join in your group discussions on a regular basis, look at your news feed on your homepage on a regular basis, and react to other people's updates on a regular basis. You know, a couple times a week you hop on, that's great. And then finally, take it offline. So a lot of us are engaging virtually pretty much all the time now because of the pandemic. You know, hopefully that will change at some point. But all of your engagement doesn't have to be on LinkedIn, even if it's going to be virtual. Pick up the phone and call somebody, or send them a message through LinkedIn to see if you can have a virtual coffee, or set up a Zoom meeting with them, a telephone call, something to take it outside of LinkedIn. So hopefully you found this helpful, and I know we had a couple of questions. I saw one that I thought somebody posted in the chat, because some people are afraid to engage or to accept invitations on LinkedIn. Dennis said he's erring on the side of quantity as opposed to quality, and a lot of lawyers are a little nervous about that. You can always block somebody after you have connected with them, and they don't get notified that you've blocked them. So you can remove them as a connection. There's a couple ways to do that. One of the easiest is to find them in your network on LinkedIn, and there's a button where you can disconnect from them there, or you can go to their profile and click on the More button, and then there's a drop down underneath that, and you can disengage with them that way. And again, they don't get notified. So if you're nervous, there's always kind of a fail-safe escape hatch that you can withdraw a connection.
So I don't know, Mara, do you just want us to go through the questions, or do you have some that you wanted to highlight?
Sure. No, and I know John Loughnane was going to join in and contribute to the conversation with the Holy Cross lawyer's perspective. But first, I just want to say thank you so much. I was taking tons of notes. This was really good.
Thank you.
Terrific.
Yeah, obviously, we love this topic, so
yes, it shows.
It's fun to share, and I know that Allison is sitting there like I am, going like, oh, I wish we would have mentioned this. I wish we would have mentioned that. So
yeah.
We always have more to say than we could possibly fit in the time, which is why we wrote the book.
Well, and I think probably, where some of these questions come in. So we'll allow you to keep going and fill in those gaps. One of the first questions that came was, are there best times during the day to post for maximum engagement? Is there a related algorithm, like at least 20 likes within the first 15 minutes, or how does LinkedIn do that? Do you know?
On the algorithm, the answer is I don't know, and LinkedIn changes things all the time. So even if there were an answer now, it would change. The best times is that's tricky. What I suggest is just doing some experimenting. If you do posting, and then you're really considering your audience. So now my audience is global. This partly comes from my time at MasterCard, but some of the things that I've done. So I will move things around. So I sometimes will go early in the morning because I can get the tail end of Europe. And then I may do something in the evening also for West Coast and Asia. But you just have to decide. I'd say the normal thing you're looking probably, I think Monday morning is less successful than most people would believe. So usually the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday is better. Sometimes it's weird that on Saturday and Sunday mornings, you can get a lot of traction on something that you post.
I would just say that people use the LinkedIn app a lot. You don't need to be tied to a desktop I think a lot of people accessing LinkedIn, just sort of scrolling through, maybe when they're at a kid's soccer game or something. So you might see some activity over the weekend, just when people are just checking it, just to keep up on what's going on in the world.
Yep.
Well, and another question that came in that's really particular to this audience here too. Someone asked, can you please address for the audience 2 points? First, about disclaimers. In addition to disclaimers, lawyers also need to be mindful that what they post complies with professional responsibility rules. And the second point was about attorneys being mindful of social media policies within their organizations. Have you found that those are things that you've had to encourage people about, or maybe encourage people to do less of?
Yeah, so I mean, I actually do a whole presentation. It's usually an hour, but it probably could go a lot longer than that on ethics and LinkedIn, or ethics and social media in general. So of course we always have to be, and I only mentioned disclaimers today because we weren't doing a whole ethics presentation, but there's a ton of different things that you need to be careful of. You have to really know the rules, the professional responsibility rules in all the jurisdictions where you practice, and also the rules of your organization too. you know, there's a lot of ways that you can unintentionally run afoul of those rules, and disclaimers is only one little tiny piece. You know, the idea of commenting on what somebody says, you want to make sure that you're not providing legal advice. And not just that, but again, this is a global platform. So, you know, Dennis mentioned before, my audience is global, your audience might be local, and in your mind anyway, in terms of who you're trying to reach, but your post is going to be seen more broadly than that. And so even if it's a comment on somebody else's post, you want to make sure that you're not giving legal advice that would be different in another jurisdiction. So you always want to make sure that either you have a disclaimer there, or you say, hey, you should contact an attorney, or something along those lines, so that you don't run afoul of those rules. There's, you know, I think mostly common sense, and thinking about, again, going back to this concept of real life versus online. Would you say this in this context if it were people standing in front of you, or not? And if the answer is not, then you shouldn't do it online either. I mean, that's kind of the short, simplified answer. But yes, those things definitely need to be top of mind for attorneys.
Yeah, and I'll add a couple of things. So one is that historically over time, attorneys have been incredibly well behaved on LinkedIn. It's a professional network. So actually, you have a fair amount of freedom there. It's not, I don't even know of times that people got into trouble on LinkedIn the same way they have on Facebook, Twitter, other things like that, because it is a professional presence. Typically, as a practical matter, on the disclaimer, I think the way to do it is to put it in the about section. There's quite a bit of room there, and even put it at the bottom of that. And the thing that people worry about is the endorsements, which people don't do as much anymore. But say somebody endorses you and they say, this is the most amazing lawyer in the world. She will win every case, no matter how crazy it, all those sorts of things. You're sort of responsible that that's posted. The good news is that LinkedIn allows you to look at those and then decide whether you're going to put them up or not. So if somebody writes a nice endorsement, but they've gone a little bit too far, you can kind of reach out to them and say, hey, could you take this out, and then send it back to me, and I'll post it. So there are a number of things. I think that historically, though, it's been kind of an area where it hasn't raised a lot of concern. There was like a lot more concern like in the early 2000s than there is now with LinkedIn. But there are a number of things where you can step over the line. The thing about photos revealing where you are, it's typically not the way that people are using LinkedIn, in that timely fashion. That's kind of more Twitter, Facebook, where you see people running into that. But you do need to think about that. And then obviously, there are people who unthinkingly reveal things about clients, or, accidentally publish, things that are confidential or stuff like that. But that's, as Allison said, like, not to do that in the real world. So don't do it there.
Great.
Two quick, I'm sorry, it's two quick points that I wanted to mention about the group that came up generally during the presentation. One is that when Allison was talking, she showed you you could decide who you wanted to post something to. One of those options is you can post to a specific group. So if you're a member of the Holy Cross Lawyers Association and you wanted your message only to go to members of the Holy Cross Lawyers Association, which is a closed group, it's possible just to choose post only to the Holy Cross Lawyers Association. The message will only go to those people. And secondly, also the search capability is terrific that Dennis talked about in terms of all the ways you could search. I mean, I think he was talking about in terms of adding connections, but if you're looking for for example, a defense lawyer in Southern California, you can go search for somebody that went to Holy Cross, who's in the legal profession, who is a first or second degree connection. I've used that before because people sometimes ask me, do I know anybody? And I find that to be a really useful way to take advantage of our network.
And then we haven't talked about the premium accounts, but this is a good time to do it. So there's 2 premium accounts and LinkedIn is starting to move you toward the premium accounts by limiting the features in the free account and enhancing the features in the premium accounts. So there's 2 premium accounts to consider. So if you actually are active in a job search, then for $29.99 a month, and they do it. You buy by the year, but you can cancel anytime. So you could just have it going while you're looking for a job. It gives you some enhanced job seeking features, the ability to reach out to people, do better searches, things like that. For $79.99. And I think this is important now if you're trying to if you're worried about your clients, finding new clients going out of business, that, and this came up with a question about retiring, because when I retired, I was in St. Louis and I moved up to Michigan. I used the Sales Navigator account, and that's $79.99. And so the search that you saw here is trivial in comparison to what you get in Sales Navigator. And you can categorize people as leads. You can do all sorts of different things that's enhanced. And that's something that you might look at if you're, say, launching a new practice area, if you're moving locations, if you want to identify. You could actually do something like, say, that you have a biotech practice and you want to identify all the CEOs of biotech companies in Michigan. In Sales Navigator, boom, you have that. And you can then recommend the categories. Is anybody a first degree, a second degree, that sort of thing. And for $80 a month, that is, I turned it on thinking I was just going to try it when we wrote the book, and I just have a really hard time turning that off.
Dennis, I have one of the questions we got about tagging, and I think I know the answer, but I'm not 100% sure, so maybe you do.
Oh, yes.
When you tag other people to your post, does it show up in their feed or become a part of their feed to be seen by others in their network? I don't think it ought, like if you tag me, I don't think those posts show up in my feed, but I think some of my connections might see it with the heading that says, Allison was tagged in this post.
Yeah, so what will happen is you basically get notified that you were tagged in somebody's post.
Right.
Then you sort of, I don't know what the right word is here. It kind of attaches to you. So as other people like it and things like that, you'll get notices of those, but you can just mute that. So you don't get those notifications. So you're basically getting the notice. So the tagging is kind of like it's like a reach out and touch, say like, hey, thinking of you. I thought that you would find this interesting. When you tag me, I always like your post. It's almost implied, say, hey, would you like or comment on this? Because I want to get the word out on this.
Right.
But I don't think it affects anything that anybody else is seeing you. It doesn't so like the fact when I said it attaches to you with the notices, that's just happening in the background. And if you're getting your notices by email, you're going to go into settings and turn that off because you don't want to get emails on that all the time.
Right, but I think some of my connections might then see it in their feed saying that I was tagged. I'm not all of them, and I'm not 100% sure about that, but it's just like sometimes you see, hey, Dennis Kennedy liked this.
Right.
So
yeah, that is an algorithm thing, because as LinkedIn becomes more of a content platform, so as opposed to, say, Twitter, and if you're really good at working with Facebook, you can do just simple reverse chronological order. LinkedIn doesn't give you that. So it's tailoring your news feed to you. So I would say some of those things, LinkedIn's algorithm is going to start to push toward your news feed because it's learning something about the connections that you have. That's an interesting question. Can you untag yourself? I think that's all in the control of the other person. So I have not found that to be an issue, but I can tell you it is annoying, the same way it is on Twitter, when somebody tags you and it's not related to something that you did. But it's also, the tagging can be a way to reach out to somebody. So if you say, hey, I would like this expert in the field to notice me, you can tag them. And they might look at your profile to see who you are, and they might connect to you. So it's strategic. I haven't seen people worried about the loss of control of a brand, because that actually would take some work on somebody who's really tagging you for no reason. I might reach out to somebody and say, like, hey, I don't know you, please stop tagging me. But I haven't seen that to be a problem. But I think the potential would exist.
Well, I know we're over time. Are you okay to answer a few more questions?
Sure.
Okay, great. Thank you to everyone. I know we've still got a good crew on, so we do have a few more that we can go through. One question is about, can you share some tips on ways to stay in contact and follow up with connections after initially connecting with people on LinkedIn?
So, some of that I think goes back to what your goals are and who the person is. But, it's like starting a conversation. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll send a thank you for either accepting my invitation or try to continue the conversation with messages through LinkedIn, because now we're connected. So I can send messages back and forth through LinkedIn. And then depending on the situation, I might jump right to, hey, let's figure out how we might be able to help each other. Let's set up a phone call. Or maybe I just keep them on my radar and I tag them in posts that I think would be interesting to them based on what our original basis was for connection. Sometimes I will, try to set up an email conversation outside of LinkedIn if that seems appropriate. Sometimes it will be, I'll follow up because I'll send them something, whether by email or through LinkedIn that I think is particularly valuable for them. Or I might suggest that they do something, again, depending on what my original basis for a connection was with them. So for me personally, sometimes me continuing the conversation is, I will look at their LinkedIn profile and say, hey, I see you have X, Y, or Z on your profile, and either comment on that or say, because part of what I do is work with lawyers on LinkedIn, is I may make a suggestion for something that I see that they are missing on their profile or that they could include on their profile or what have you. So it depends on the context, but it's just some way to continue the conversation with that person. And a lot of it depends on how we originally connected and why I originally either accepted or sent the invitation.
Yeah, it's interesting how the pandemic has blown up a lot of what you used to do. So you would say, oh, if I connected with somebody new who was local, I might have coffee or lunch or something like that. A lot of people have been very successful with LinkedIn when they travel, of just looking to see who they might know in that city and then seeing if somebody's available to have dinner, coffee, whatever. So that's become really difficult. So I would say usually the thing is that you connect, and if somebody's doing stuff on their newsfeed that's interesting, then you're going to do the likes and the comments to kind of stay in attention, in their range of attention, and then you might reach out with something, or if you're doing something, you might invite them. Nobody really likes on LinkedIn when you accept a connection from somebody and they send you, something that's a salesy thing. Like, people hate that. There's only one thing that's worse on LinkedIn, and I'm not counting stalking, which I will agree is worse than anything. But the thing I find that's worse is people invite you to connect on LinkedIn and they believe that you've given them permission to subscribe to their email newsletter. I hate that. And then they don't follow the rules and it's impossible to unsubscribe. That's even worse. But it's just sort of like a normal thing. And I think in the pandemic times, people are starting to think about networking in some different ways and what you would do, to do something where you're not in real life. And so what you might do is, if you had like a Zoom, meeting group or, thing, you might connect with somebody and invite them to that, but super low pressure.
Well, and here's a question that's kind of, along those same lines. Is someone was asking about, well, I'll read the question specifically. It says, does it make sense to send out a message or post to all of your connections to get feedback on a certain aspect that your company offers? Or, high school that you represent, would you use it as a way of gathering feedback? Or how would you encourage someone to get that kind of feedback instead?
So, when you say send out a message to all of your connections on LinkedIn, the way to do that is by just doing a post, right? There isn't a way in the message feature, you're limited to how many people you could send a LinkedIn message to, which is different than a post. So if you want to reach everybody, I would do it in a post or maybe a series of posts, and then ask the question. Here's what my company is thinking about doing. What are your thoughts? What do you think? How can I improve it? What would you like to see that's different? Would this be helpful to you? Like, ask the questions and try to engage people, and then make sure if people respond to you that you engage back with them. So don't ignore. If you ask a question and you're asking for engagement, you want to make sure that you keep that going. You could also find groups that would be your potential audience for your company, and post in the group. So as John mentioned before, hey, one of the audiences on LinkedIn is you can post directly to a group. So you might take that same question or that same post and post it on your feed. And you could do that a couple of times, because if you remember, I said everybody in your network is not going to see every post. So you may want to do that a couple of times if you're really looking for feedback, and then post into some different groups too that might contain that audience to say, hey, what do you think? And try to engage people that way.
Yeah, when I've looked at that, what I've done and what I intend to do is to do the polling in like SurveyMonkey or Google Forms or something, and then point people through the LinkedIn post to that.
To the poll.
Yeah, and there is a new feature that I'm seeing that LinkedIn is rolling out, and I think there's a number of new features that are super interesting, but they're definitely in closed beta. But one is called LinkedIn Polls, and I think they're going to allow people to do more surveying within LinkedIn. So that could be a possibility, but I think that's super early beta.
Great. And then one last question is about someone who's in a job seeker, so who's looking for a job right now. And someone mentioned that LinkedIn's promoting more live videos and encouraging people to post videos. Would you suggest that job seekers try to post a video of themselves, maybe a video version of their summary, their about section to talk about themselves, or is that maybe taking things one step too far for LinkedIn?
So, I mean, I'm hoping that you can't hear my landscaper outside, so I apologize if you're hearing the buzzing in the back, the vagaries of, doing these virtual presentations. But, look, I started experimenting with video last year, and I have found it to be very helpful. It helps to engage some people. They like to see video. It's everybody's got a short attention span now, so if you do video, I would keep it relatively short. Live versus not live, I don't know that it matters for if you're talking about job seeking and you're talking about essentially what is a promotional video about yourself. To me, live is really more for things that people might want to engage with the video, but that might just be my personal opinion. I like it. Some of it depends on how comfortable you are in front of the camera and how prepared you are and all of those other great things, your lighting and, what have you. But I think it can be another thing that would help you stand out from other candidates. Dennis, what do you think?
Yeah, it's comfort level on all this stuff. So if you're comfortable with it, I think it has huge potential. So I was just looking this morning, and I think Allison, you know Evan Brown is an early blogger. He's starting to do some YouTube things, and he did a 2-minute video of like 3 things you needed to know when you're working with independent contractors. And it was a 2-minute YouTube video. And, it wasn't professional, was fine, and when people described the backgrounds, was definitely a hostage video background. But it was great, and I think you could do a thing to say if you did a 2-minute video and you're looking for a job and it just had you explaining something, or it had you like doing, explaining say you were an estate planner and you were explaining an estate planning concept to a client who just happened to be your wife, and you were just taking a video of that, or you had a video from you presenting something. I guess you could do, I don't know what courts allow in the way of video where you do like a clip of an argument. I think that could be really successful as, the people who are hiring are going to be overwhelmed. And you need to do something that's a little bit different. And like I say, if you say, what I'm trying to do with LinkedIn is to get an interview, then maybe that's the sort of thing that's enough to make you stand out to get the interview. So that's the way I would think about it. But if you're not comfortable on video, it's not going to be
Practice
good.
first.
Yes.
Practice first.
But I think we all are getting more comfortable on video because of Zoom. The other thing you could do if you're in a Zoom meeting and it's the right kind of thing, no confidential information or stuff, you might better record it and like cut out a clip that you would do. So a lot of the LinkedIn posting and things, we didn't explicitly say this, so I'll say it now, but a lot of it is repurposing stuff that you already done. So there was a question I know from the registration that was like, what's the best thing to post? In a way, it's kind of tips, checklists, those kinds of things. So stuff you already have lying around, and some of that can get surprising audience because that's what people are looking for. And if you think of like, oh, if I'm not a lawyer and I'm looking to find out something about, H-1B visas and like where I need to go, and there's this, 1-minute video where some friendly person explains that could take off.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I know, there's a handful of people who have stuck with us over the hour mark. So thank you so much for your great questions and for your continued attention. This has really been phenomenal. And I know that we extended the invitation outside of the HCLA. And so I hope for those of you who joined who are not lawyers or not within the legal profession that you also, enjoyed this, because I know I got a lot out of it that I'll look at my own profile with a new light. So I want to thank you both so much for your time and attention. This was fantastic.
That was fun, and like you said, you could tell that we love doing this presentation, talking about LinkedIn. So
thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Allison, and thank you, Mara, for helping to organize it. Very much appreciate it.
Absolutely. And for anyone who missed the beginning, this has been recorded, so we'll share this with everyone in a few days once we've been able to get it up on our Holy Cross website. And of course, I always share them on LinkedIn, so you can find it there. I'm sure that we'll get this up in the HCLA group soon, so make sure to become a member. Make sure to nominate someone for one of HCLA's great awards. Application deadline is June 30th. And with that, I hope that you have a wonderful afternoon. Enjoy. It's sunny here, so I hope it's sunny where you are. And Allison and Dennis, thank you again.
Thank you.